Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. Now, hopefully, we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court. But again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Good. I'm hopeful. Good. I'm still blown away by how bizarre that meeting was. I'm blown away by how committed so many Western powers have been, us included, to continuing this thing without end. I wonder what Connor thinks about all this. Joining me now, Connor Tomlinson, writer with Courage Media from across the pond over there in the UK. Connor, I've been marveling at my own country, especially under Joe Biden. I don't know what you're thinking about yours, and just how weirdly committed everyone is to keeping this thing going without end. They almost had it over a couple years ago, and the Western powers said, no, keep going. I don't get it.
Well, one of the reasons that the war wasn't over a couple of years ago and Zelensky didn't acquiesce to a peace deal when less land had been lost to Russia was because our former prime minister, 3 prime ministers ago now, Boris Johnson, decided to pose as a Churchill figure on the world stage and demanded Zelensky keep going with the support of NATO, the EU, and the US. And he signed all of our collective countries up to give Ukraine aid until the heat death of the universe or either side runs out of men. The problem is now our leaders are trying to keep the war going because they're trying to ride the coattails of improperly applied Second World War analogies. So until the end of time, every single conflict boils down to one party being Hitler and the other party being Churchill. And so Zelensky is Churchill and Vladimir Putin is Hitler. But Donald Trump is also Hitler for trying to stop Hitler and Churchill from fighting. Oh, and by the way, you can't be Chamberlain by appeasing Hitler abroad, but you have to be Chamberlain at home because you have to practice multiculturalism, because if you don't bring all of those very illiberal minorities into your country who don't respect Western values in the first place, you're also literally Hitler. So you have to be Churchill abroad to fight Hitler, but you have to be Chamberlain at home to not be Hitler. And this is why all of our leaders are saying garbled nonsense about this conflict. And really the only person that's doing anything practical about it to stop people dying, conscripts dying on both sides, while also ensuring that the American taxpayer gets a return on investment for all of the aid they've provided to the Ukrainians, is President Trump.
Connor, can you help me understand the whole Boris Johnson stepping in thing? Because I've heard this multiple times from people who would know he wasn't just kind of some side thing. He was the leading figure stopping the peace deal. Now, I'm not as familiar with this guy as you are. Is it just as simple as he wanted to be Churchill? Is there something more nefarious here? It's honestly, it's so evil on its face to just stop the stopping of a conflict like this. I don't understand.
I think domestic conflict played a lot into this. So for context, the UK had, I think, the 6th strictest lockdown in the world between 2020 and early 2022. And Boris Johnson accelerated the end of that lockdown while he was getting briefings of incursions on the Russia-Ukraine border. And he was very unpopular and ended up being ousted as leader of the Conservative Party because while he imposed these lockdowns where people couldn't see their dying family members, attend funerals, spend Christmas with their loved ones, he was having numerous parties in the garden of Downing Street, and lots of his staff were having drinks. And he wasn't present at all of those parties, but lots of them were pinned on him. And it was endemic of the culture in Downing Street, where he thought there was one rule for we, the political elite, and one rule for the rest of the plebs that we impose it on. And Boris Johnson was tanking in the polls at the time because of his handling of lockdown and because of his perceived hypocrisy, and this dragged out until the summer. But the only thing that was keeping him popular in any way to the British public was his handling of Ukraine, because he was unwavering in his insistence that Putin was the aggressor, that this was the Second World War re-won, and so he had to play the part of Winston Churchill. And he's still trying to play that part, even after over 1 million Ukrainians and Russians total have died, and even after both sides really haven't moved very much. I mean, the Russians have spent an awful lot of blood on the conflict, but not nearly as much treasure as the sanctions would have liked. The Ukrainians have spent a hell of a lot of blood and a lot of our treasure. And as much as we'd like to say, if it were our country, we wouldn't give up a part of it, it doesn't matter how much we would give up. What matters is how much we can defend of our own accord. And the problem is, without a lot of taxpayer subsidized aid from the US, the UK, and Europe, the Ukrainians are barely hanging on by a thread. So actually, Boris Johnson put them in a war that they cannot win. And now President Trump, to his credit, is trying to get them out of it, while the rest of the European Union saber rattles on behalf of escalating a war that they themselves don't have the troops to fight. I mean, just one quick stat for you, Jesse. The Times ran some polling earlier this year for Generation Z in the UK, and only 11% said they would fight for the UK. What they mean by this is only 11% said they would fight to sign up to die in a war that the UK would involve them in. Lots of that's because lots of Generation Z, the very diverse generation in the UK, don't feel the UK is their country. But a lot of it is because young, straight white men like me know we are public enemy number one of the modern anti-racist woke state, who have been told since birth that pretty much every war is bad and have seen every foreign policy bench in our lifetime fail, and are thinking, why would I fight for this particular world order? Why would I fight to put pride parades in Kyiv for a government who doesn't like me very much? So even if Europe involves its populations in these wars, they can't really do anything without America's say-so. They don't have the troops to fight it, and they also don't have the energy to fight it because they've spent, in the last year, more money on Russian gas exports than they have on aid to Ukraine while the war's going on. So, complete hypocrisy. President Trump's the only one that's speaking sense on it.
Okay, so what was Starmer talking about, your PM, for those not aware? What was Starmer talking about when he was talking about we'll send the planes and the troops? He made it sound like Lord Raglan was sailing through the Dardanelles as we speak.
Well, if you notice, he said that and then immediately said, if America wants us to. What he was trying to do is get a clip for the UK media, who for some reason doesn't like President Trump very much. They haven't realized actually how much good the revolution, the Second American Revolution across your side of the pond is doing and how much we would want to copy that, actually. He was giving clips to them to try and soothe his ailing popularity, because he is, and his government is, the least popular government on record. They got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019, an actual communist that Starmer threw out of the party, when he lost to Boris Johnson and gave him a landslide. But just because the previous Conservative government was so unpopular, because they, among other things, let in 1 million immigrants every single year to a country that is the size of New York State, he won by default. Now, after his mishandling of various crises like the Southport murders and the grooming gang scandal at the start of the year, which is still going on and nobody's doing anything about it, he knows he is hated by the majority of the country. And the one issue he might be able to claim some ground on is, much like Boris Johnson, pretending to be Churchill and standing up to big bad meanies, Hitler, Trump and Putin. And so what he's done is tried to position himself as... Have you ever seen the film Love Actually? Hugh Grant's PM in that, where he gets to stand up to big bullish America and make the UK look good again. That's how he thinks he can regain his popularity. But if President Trump draws it to a close, well, he can't grift off that issue and it isn't working.
Connor, immigration. Obviously, we have our own problems here, and they are massive. And I'll be honest, I don't know if we can solve ours. I don't know if we can fix 20 million people imported in 4 years by one president. I don't know if it's even realistic to get that many people out of the country as badly as we need it. Your situation over there may be even more dire than ours, which is saying something. Can Britain save itself, or is it too far gone when it comes to this?
Well, as for the situation of our immigration, as I mentioned, England in particular, because they get the most amount of this immigration, are the size of New York State, and we get 1 million immigrants a year, which is the same level of legal migration that the whole of the United States gets. And of course, your porous southern border, porous under Joe Biden and the various uniparty traitors before President Trump, saw millions crossing every single year. Well, ever since 2018, we've had about 160,000 men in boats crossing from France like they're the Viking invaders. And they're mainly from North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkey. And we found out yesterday in the pages of The Telegraph that a quarter of all sex crimes in this country are committed by those migrants. Some of them are 77 times more likely than the native British population to commit sex crimes. And that's broken down just by being from somewhere else. It's not broken down by ethnic origin. So it's even worse. But of course, the government doesn't track that data because it makes it look too bad. So we're getting hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants and 1 million a year legal migrants, 95% of whom do not pay more tax than they take. So we are hemorrhaging economically, rapidly changing demographically. Mohammed is now the most popular baby name in England. And if you're asking, will this nation of Mohammeds abide by British values, you're asking the wrong question. Crime is through the roof, and no government is looking to stop this anytime soon. The one party that we do have, which is, or was until this week, the most popular of the polls, Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party, has just called the police on their most popular MP for having an argument with their Muslim party chairman. And anonymous sources have said we wanted to get rid of him because he was radicalized by the online right to support mass deportations. Bear in mind, the majority of the British public support deporting all the illegal immigrants in this country. There are over 2 million, by the way. A majority of the British public actually support President Trump's policy of mass deportations, and promising mass deportations just won President Trump not just the popular vote, but a large share of Hispanic men who know it's a common sense policy. So why does Nigel Farage not support this? And why is he persecuting his own MPs? And why is he sabotaging his chance to take power in 2029, delivering the popular policies which are the only way to uphold the rule of law that the British public actually want? It's baffling. And honestly, Jesse, I don't see a way out of this anytime soon.
Crap. Well, I'm rooting for you guys, brother. Come back soon, as always. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.